So guys, it is freezing out. It is -3 without the wind chill, and it's really windy, so it's really cold, and the lighting sucks, and I'm driving, and this stupid thing that this is rested on is shaky, so I need to get a new one. It's been a mess, but whatever, it'll be fine. And I'm nervous because I've got a lot of stuff I've got to take home from physical therapy that I want to make sure I'm doing right. So I'm just trying to get everything kind of processed and thought through in my head today correctly, so I can be prepared and handle everything right and have more luck with a hopefully quicker recovery. And this idiot just pulled right out in front of me, which is why I'm thankful to have one of the little hook things, because I wouldn't be able to talk to you guys otherwise. I wouldn't be able to just like focus on a phone and recording or whatever. So it's nice to be able to like put you guys up here and, you know, not have to think about it, I guess, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to just drive and talk, and I have to drive a lot with my doctor stuff, and just it's a nice way to be able to catch up with all of you. So I wanted to do a quick video. I posted one right before this about just ideas I have and videos I pre-filmed, and I'm going to be filming hopefully today, to just kind of get them out there and really get a few topics started that I've really wanted to be talking about for a while now and just haven't gotten around to. So I'm hoping to get the pre-recorded ones up soon, and for sure get a few knocked out today, and this will be one of them, hopefully. So I wanted to make a video about a serious topic, but I'm going to try to break it into a few parts, because otherwise it's going to be rushed. I'm going to feel like even an hour, half hour is too long, so I need to break it down, and then it's just not going to come out right at all. So I want to make sure to give it the time and attention it deserves and needs. And that is what it was like being raised by my Jehovah's Witness grandparents, who raised me my entire life, and how that was as a kid, how I think it shaped me as a teenager, a young adult, and now, you know, an adult parent, someone who's got a lot of job experience and life experience and relationship experience, and just kind of like the trials and ups and downs of that. So yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing. So basically, as a child, I was very sheltered. I took horseback riding lessons often, multiple days a week, from different trainers, because that's what I always had an interest in. I was always interested in. So from like first grade level on, I was homeschooled. Halfway through first grade, I was homeschooled, and then allowed to join a riding academy, which I would go to almost every weekday. And sometimes it was every weekday. I think it was like 4 days a week some weeks, some days it was every day, whatever. Some days it was on the weekends too. And this went on for many years, like until I started professionally training myself with horses. Anyways, so I loved it as a kid because I got to be around the horses, and I got to spend time with my family. I had a few very like horse related friends, and I remember, because they weren't Jehovah's Witnesses, it took a lot of like coaxing, even as a young kid, to be able to get them to be around, because they really only wanted us around other Jehovah's Witness kids. And I remember my grandparents actually getting yelled at that I had one friend that I would bring over. I mean, and we're talking at like 7 years old. I would bring 7, 8 years old. I'd bring this friend over, and we would literally play horses and color, and I would do, like, she'd do her homework while I did some of my homeschool work. It was just really nice for us both. And that was still like frowned upon and looked down upon, and we were heavily monitored, and it was very hard because my grandparents were very strict, and my mom, biological mom, wasn't doing anything as far as raising me, but she would call like once a week with my grandmother to try to like have input, or once every other week once I got a little older. She was more Budinsky, but she would just give her opinions and cause trouble and be like, well, as a teenager I was sneaking out and doing this, as a preteen I was drinking and I was having sex and blah blah blah. I'm sure she is too. And at the time I was super young, like I said, like between 6 and 9 years old, let's say. So I wasn't doing anything, but I would get my grandmother, who would, at the time, she had a just vile temper. She would blow up at me over nothing, just what my mom was saying, and I would get my mom calling me, not coming over, not being anything, but my biological mom calling me and being like, oh, I don't know why your grandma's like that, while she was then calling my grandma, which I didn't know about, and telling her like, oh, I'm sure she's not just innocently playing horses, I'm sure they're talking about boys and stuff. And that's what I was doing at that age, and it was just a chaotic mess. So it was, I didn't know that she was talking to my grandma, and my grandma never told me, my mom never told me, so I was like, why am I getting yelled at, and what's going on? And then on my 10th birthday, I got my period, so puberty, fun, and yeah, that's TMI or whatever, but it plays into this. So then I was still young as shit, innocent, and my mom was now telling me like, oh, I'm sure you're doing stuff with boys. And at the time, I was really looking only at girls, to be honest. So my interest had sparked, but only with girls. And I didn't want to say that because, oh my god, that would have been like disowned, like you're disowned for that. So no, I'm not going to say that. Well, I was like, no, Mom, I really, I called her Sarah because she wasn't a mom to me. I was like, no, Sarah, no, like, I'm not interested in boys, don't worry, nothing's happening. And she'd turn around and be like, well, I talked to Braylon on the phone, and I guarantee you she's doing stuff with boys you don't know about, and she's probably sneaking out like I was, because I was as a young kid. And my grandma would literally just flip out at me over nothing all of the time. And as an adult, I can honestly say we've talked this through now, and she knows, like, it literally was nothing at the time. And she admits, like, yeah, Sarah would be calling me and planting this stuff in my mind, and I'd be thinking about all the trouble Sarah got into, and I would just assume you were doing it. So she's like, I tried to scare tactic you into not going. And I'm talking like screaming, and not being able to have any outside contact except for studying, and only with my adult riding instructors going and having long hours of riding lessons, and like very strict, brutal training. Like, it was very, very strict, not like horsey camp type stuff. It was like a board tied to your back so you sat up straight, like tacks on the saddles to get your 2-point perfectly. It was really strict to get me to be a perfect trainer at a young age. Like, it was hard, and I loved it, and I'm thankful for it because it really shaped me to be a more understanding trainer and to be polished in a lot of ways too. So I don't regret it, I'm happy about it. But the only contact I had was with my religious grandparents, their religious older friends, and my select few instructors who were being extremely hard and strict on me. I had no outside contact for sometimes weeks or a month at a time, because my grandma would just think about something that Sarah did when she was younger, and have Sarah going, well, yeah, that's normal, that's what people do at this age if you don't shelter them. And she kind of got off on me getting punished for stuff because she got punished for stuff. And so she didn't want, me to get to have fun, even though I wasn't doing anything at the time. So, because I was so sheltered, I got a lot of resentment. And my mom was a groupie and a wild heart, and she got pregnant with me when she was 16, and she had an abortion right after me, and then got pregnant with my brother out of wedlock, and then had another kid. And then at this time she was still with that man, divorcing him, and immediately sleeping with a couple other guys. She ended up having another kid out of wedlock, but that's like 3 years down the line from now. She gets pregnant 2.5 years, has a kid 3 years and a fourth later. So my lovely mother, biological mother, was just at this time telling me how it's not fair, and how she understands because she wanted to kind of live a freer life when she was my age, and she knows how awful it is, and she doesn't know why my grandparents are like that. Well, she's feeding into it, so she doesn't know why. But I ended up just feeling like I couldn't speak to my grandparents at all. And because of this, I actually, at like 10 3/4 years old, had a female friend of mine who was 13, and I lost my virginity willingly, and nothing bad happened, willingly to her. Because, and it wasn't innocent. It wasn't just kissing and a little like, no, it was way too much for someone that young to be doing on either one of our ends. And I was the boy role in it, to not get into too many details because that's super young and it was super inappropriate on both of our ends. But it was, my mom was telling me all these wild stories, and she was now going through a divorce, so she was going to like concerts and getting backstage, and how that goes, because I've been as a young adult, I kind of was wild too. So yeah, it was, and I hadn't even been to that point in my life yet. So at this point I was still innocent, but my biological mom's going out and partying and doing crazy stuff. And then by like 12, she would pick me up, and once in a while, like, she wouldn't hang out with me as a normal person or a kid or anything, but she'd get like concert tickets. And I went through puberty young, and I had big boobs by the time I was 11. Like, by the time I was 12 years old, I was in like a double D bra. Like, it was attention that I wasn't ready for, and I was sheltered by my grandparents, and then had my mom pushing me, taking me to concerts and everything. And by 13, she had helped me so I could basically get in and appear older than I was. And I ended up sleeping with a guy for the first time at 13 because my mom was being a groupie, and that was the fun lifestyle. Look how much fun it was with her. And I'd go home and my grandparents would be mad if I even said, oh, like, that guy's really cute on TV about like a kid my age. That wasn't allowed. So I ended up basically behaving and listening, except for when my biological mom would come in the picture, and then she'd turn around to get me in trouble and be like, oh, look, she is looking at boys now, even though my grandparents had thought I was since I was 10, and it was really 3 years of me like, I think I only like girls. And then finally, like, watching Sarah love like a lot of better known rock stars and getting band guys' attention because I looked a lot older. Like, I really fell into that, and my grandma was cracking down now. It was, oh, she is trouble and blah, blah, blah. And it was to the point where at times she wouldn't let me go to the bathroom alone. She wouldn't do anything. She was very verbally abusive, and it was stuff I wasn't doing. That she would be like, oh, I'm sure you're going to be drinking. I'm sure you're going to be smoking pot. And the only time things like that would be around were when Sarah was there. So then the only freedom she'd give me was the once in a while Sarah would drop by, and that was the only time I was really doing anything. I was 13 when I had my 24-year-old guy friend come over with his motorcycle, and my mom like let him hang out with me and my much younger sister and her, and was just like being herself, and she slipped me a beer that I could, like, it was like she was encouraging it. But then like at home, oh my god, it was the end of the world. And that's where I did get into like some like partying with like heavier like substances at a really young age, because it was my biological mom pushing it and really pushing me into that groupie crazy lifestyle. And at the time I had been playing guitar for a few years. It's part of my like curriculum. It was something I did. So I was like in a light little band thing on the side that my grandma would never be okay with. So like I had to like get my mom to help me go do it, like get out of the house. And it was like my mom fed off of that biological mom, and she did. And she sees this, my mom, but she did. She loved the fact that she hated people being happy, and she loved being who everyone relies on. So when people could be happy with someone else, well, then that's screwed up. So, if my grandma and I were close, she's got to ruin that. When my sister and I, when I was older, she kind of was telling me how she didn't think mom understood, and she didn't think grandma understood, and I was like, okay, I agree. They don't, and they're toxic to each other, and she was really relying on me. And then I had been assaulted. That's what gave me PTSD. And my biological mom swooped in and was like, look, she's going through a lot. She can't be there for you. She's going to ditch you like everybody else, and wouldn't let her hang out with me. And now we don't talk because she's with Sarah. And you know what? One day she'll realize that, like, I was brutally hurt, and like my life had changed. I went from being a normal person to having PTSD flashbacks, and I was still trying to be there for her. I just needed some time to cope with what I was dealing with too. So when I was like, wanted to come over and be in the house and do something, I I don't want to go out and do something fun and active, like, but I still want to spend time with you. Sarah's like, oh, see, she really just doesn't even want you around, so she's just offering something more boring. And it was just, she's just toxic. And she does it with everybody. Her ex-husband knows it. My half-brother knows it and has said it, and has said that his biological father says it all the time. And it's true. Everybody knows it. And at that time, though, people didn't, and she tore everybody apart. So now I'm getting a little bit older. I got a therapist at 13 because it was a disaster. And I actually still talk to that person now, and it's almost, God, it's a lot of years later. It's more than 15 years later. And I'm still talking to the same person, and he's great. And he's been like something more than a friend now, and he's wonderful, and he's the only secure adult that I really had. So that was a miracle. And I told my grandmother and my biological mother, like, I need a guy to talk to. And they were immediately, why is that? And I was like, mentally, I relate more to men. I feel like mentally, I think more like a guy. I still feel that way. I just do. That's just what my mind is. I am physically female, but I feel like mentally I'm not. And I really, truly know that having somebody who thought like me in a male role in my life was detrimentally positive and changing. And then throughout all this, my grandpa and I were super close when I was younger, and he being a teacher and my grandma being a substitute teacher, or a teacher's aide, I should say. It was strict and tough, but my grandpa was great with playing with little kids, and he's great with my daughters now. But when the second it was like, my grandma was like, oh, I think she's looking at boys and stuff, he wouldn't talk to me about it. And it was just, oh, well, you're not a kid anymore. And I felt like he turned his back on me, and it really hurt. And as an adult, I told him, like, that's my biggest fear with my girls, is when they go through puberty and they have real problems, you're just going to turn your back on them, and you're being their best friend now, but you were my best friend. Like, what happened? And I felt really hurt by that. But he's a good man. He's just not emotionally very capable and very deep, and he doesn't want to get into anything stressful or drama related or emotional. He's just good at playing with kids when it's lighthearted and fun, and the second it's anything that's not cookie cutter perfect and the way the religion wants it to be, then you're bad and he's out. And that's that. And we sat down and talked many years later, and things are fine. So I'm not going to jump to that point yet, but I'll get to it. So basically, this was a long, long time later. But we kind of just separated, and I at 16 had a boyfriend who worked in law enforcement. I'm not going to say where, not going to say any names. And he put his foot down and was like, hey, look, this is, sorry if you cannot see, there we go, that's better. It was like, hey, look, my thing came loose, so I'm trying to hook it again, so I apologize for the distraction for a moment there. But anyways, back to the story. I was 16, and the person who was working in law enforcement was who I was with, and I've had a few other people who were really wonderful who worked in law enforcement who I dated for when I was legal and an adult and everything, not this type of thing. Anyways, so this person and he stood up to my grandma. My grandma was like, well, we don't believe in anybody being able to have a gun or shoot anybody, so we don't believe in calling the police if something goes wrong. And we don't believe in law enforcement at all. And he was like, that's insane. I'm sorry, that's insane, because if something goes wrong and happens, you're going to not call the police, and that plays really hugely into stuff. And even to side note, preface this, as an adult, many years later, even now, like now, when we were at the restraining order hearing, my grandmother was a witness, and I can say this, it is public record. And she talked, and they said, why on earth, when you had to pull this man off of her repetitively, when you had the police in your house and everything, why did you not call the police when she was literally almost killed on the floor? Why did you hesitate and not call the police immediately? Why did you let this keep going on? And it was really, well, her religion believes in, if you are with somebody and you're in a relationship with somebody, that you work it out no matter what. They can rape you and beat you and literally try to murder you. And even divorcing them then is an option up for question. But it's not something you guaranteed. Sorry, I'm not even going to cut it out because that was 100% my fault. But anyway, it's something you don't guarantee to do. It's something that is, okay, well, they beat you and almost killed you, and you have multiple broken bones and cuts and burns, and you were raped and you had a rape kit and the police there, but still, you try to work it out because you have a kid together, or because you committed to that person even if you don't have a kid together. And it's one of those things, like, that's sad. That's not right, because I know later in life they stopped. All of my mother's siblings, my grandmother had 2 sons. She adopted her brother when both of their parents died. He was 12 or 13. And she had 2 sons of her own and my mother, her daughter. And then she adopted me later on as well, as I explained. But none of those siblings of hers will talk to Sarah because she got pregnant with me at 16. And that's wrong, and that's bad, and that's not right. And it's against religion to have sex before you're married. And she made a worldly mistake, and to this day, mind you, like, forever later, like almost 30 years later, it's too bad. That's not gonna happen, because, you know, that's the way of the world. You know, it doesn't matter if it's 25, 26, 27 years later, who cares? It's, you still at 16 years old got pregnant, so who cares? And that's toxic. And my grandmother knew that I looked at the religion as something wrong. I don't believe in the belief. I have a higher power. I'm not, I believe that there's an energy source that controls things, and that when we die, our energy goes back into the world and kind of gives back to the energy source, and that while we're living, we can bring positive or negative energy to that energy source. I think that's always going to be a part of my beliefs and something I feel strongly in. So I do have a higher power in that extent, but it's not a Christian type God. I do believe in my higher power. It does keep me sane and happy. I believe there's more to the world than this, but I also am, you know, rational about things, and I don't believe in, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness myself, I'm not a Catholic, whatever. It's just, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, I'm not that religion. And because they still talk to me, we had a conversation, because like I was explaining, I had this police officer boyfriend who actually stood up to her, stood up to, hey, you stand up for people and you call the police if something's wrong, and yada yada, when I was 16. And I ended up moving out before I was 18 for a little while, and at the time I was working full-time and doing things on my own and working at a fitness store and doing a lot of stuff and doing okay with myself and really being self-sufficient, because I kind of had to do anything that I believed in on my own, and everything else was just structured and ruled by somebody else. And it was my biological mom speaking in my grandma's ear and still lying about almost everything and being crazy, and then just causing chaos. So it was just a big whirlwind of a mess, and it was me basically just saying to her, I can't have a friendly relationship with you. I love you. Thank you for raising me, but you caused so much damage. You were so verbally abusive. You were not understanding. You didn't teach me about anything. She scare tacticked me left and right. She let a lot of things go that weren't right. A lot of bullying, a lot of really bad treatment from my cousins. It was awful. And finally, when she saw her own sons turn on her, this is now when I was 20, almost 21, like towards that age, this is when stuff started going downhill. This is right before I got assaulted, and right into when I got assaulted the one other time, you know, that I've had something really bad like that happen, and that's what gave me PTSD. And yeah, that was bad, and I needed someone to be there for me, and I was drinking and using substances to numb it, because my biological mom got me into that, and she was the one who understood me, and at this point I had talked through with my brothers and my half-sister, the one half-sister, and really realized how toxic she was and how she was just trying to get in the middle of everything and cause problems with everything. And I had cut her out of my life because I knew what she was. And she had also basically told me that I was selfish I tried to tell her what happened. Not everything. I tried to tell her what happened with the two guys in Milwaukee, two African-American guys who jumped me, who hurt me. And I tried to talk to her, and she cut me off, and she's like, "Do you realize I worked all day today?" It was a Monday that I was talking to her. I was like, "Yeah, so did I. And I actually worked that Sunday, too." It's like, "Yeah, we both did. What's up? What are you talking about?" You know, and mind you, I had brought her over dinner. I had brought her over drinks because she wanted them. I had brought a movie over that she wanted to see. Like, it wasn't anything like that. Like, it was like a nice setting. And I was just trying to say, like, hey, the stuff, I wasn't going into gruesome detail. I was just like, hey, you know, since that all happened, like, I've been having a difficult time. And I got to that far in the conversation, no detail, no anything. And she's like, "You are so selfish. When I've been working hard all week and I just wanted to have fun and have drinks, you're so selfish to sit there and try to talk to me about something like that. Like, you already went through it, so your life has to be changed, but mine doesn't." And I was like, oh, okay. And at the time, I was heartbroken because I was taught and raised in a very everything's your fault fashion. And that's why it was hard for me to, in these last 30 months of my life, get out of an abusive relationship, because I have that little voice that blames myself for everything. But anyways, I felt awful and shocked and hurt. And then my brother had just previously to that gotten hurt himself. A car had hit him while riding a bicycle, and he had brain damage that still affects him to this day. And she refused to call the cops on the person who did the hit and run because she didn't want the drama in her life and stress in her life. And I watched my brother, and I still know he's going through trouble because of it. And it's like, oh, okay, I don't care what reason you have now and what excuse it is. I heard you say that verbally. My grandmother heard you say that. And you would rather not deal with it because, oh, I've got stress to think about with him in the hospital, and let somebody get away with almost killing your son. But that's fine. And that's great. And, you know, when I get extremely hurt, your daughter, and something happens, it's just even telling you that it's still bothering them because they, you know, they weren't expecting to go through something like that ever in life, and they don't know how to handle it. You basically tell them that they're selfish for talking to you. And so, because of all that, I went home. I sat my grandma down in the bathroom, explained all this to her, and said, it's me or her. You can talk to her and talk to me. I'm not saying you have to cut her out, but you have to understand that she's wrong, or you can think that I'm wrong, and that's up to you. Whichever way you think is fine. But if you think that I'm wrong in this, and you think I'm a bad person, and you think that she's right to not be defending her son or me, and it's right that she did this stuff. And I said to her, this is how I found out about her calling my grandma and all. I had said, why were you always accusing me of stuff, especially when I was younger, just because Sarah did it? She's like, well, Sarah was telling me you were doing it. And that's when it clicked. And we had this huge conversation. At this point, let's say I'm 22. We had this huge conversation about everything. We talked it all through, sat down with each other, and realized, hey, I need to get help. I need to turn my life around. I got sober that year and stayed sober this whole time for, many years. And everything, sorry, the light's awful right now. But I got sober and stayed sober, and we have a wonderful friendship. Let's see if I can get this better for a second. We have a wonderful friendship and relationship now. But in the beginning, it was crazy. And I think what I wish I would have done is immediately, as a kid, said, hey, like the second she was accusing me of stuff or just yelling at me or grounding me for no reason, I should have said, hey, like, I'm not doing any of this. And then she would have said, hopefully, like, oh, well, this is what your biological mom was saying. And it would have given clarity and been, 22 years of less drama. But now I'm going to make a part 2 to this video explaining how we healed after this conversation and got our relationship to a really great point to now we live together and we love each other and help each other out every single day. And how she's kind of kept the religious beliefs but strayed away from some of the really nonsensical rules. of that religion that are toxic to a family. So I know it's the adult's responsibility to have noticed what was going on, and she should have noticed, but she didn't. And now we need to move forward. So I'm going to make a part 2 to this, and we'll see where it goes. Thanks for listening.